Today's Get Your Spirit in Shape episode is brought to you by the United Methodist Insurance Program. Visit uminsure.org to request a quote and see how we can partner with you in ensuring your ministry's safety and peace of mind. Remember, at the United Methodist Insurance Program, we're not just about insurance, we're about ministry. We live in a delight-deficient world, one where we as adults are driven to be productive and where play is seldom prioritized. The Reverend Tyler Strange reminds us that soul care means living from the inside out, and that by rediscovering joy, we can unlock a playful spirit. Tyler, welcome to Get Your Spirit in Shape.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have. I think it's going to be a fun conversation and also really impactful. Before we get started with that, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about who you are and your work within the United Methodist Church.
Sure. So I am Tyler Strange. I'm just turned 40 this. God, it's been actually a big year all around. Turned 40 in February. Found out in early March that we were moving to start a new United Methodist Church faith community in what is a Myrtle Beach address, but it's the Carolina Forest community. I've been appointed as associate pastor to First UMC Conway. And so being appointed there, it's really neat. I work with some clergy who are friends, and we're connected to the Wesley Foundation at Coastal Carolina. They're an anchor in the Conway community, and they have a few people who are in the Carolina Forest community where I am been sent to serve as an extension of First UMC Conway. So I am a cradle to now United Methodist. And I am one of those people who are relentlessly optimistic about our future together and what we are becoming together in Christ.
Well, Tyler, I love hearing you talk about that. You are in the South Carolina Annual Conference. For those people who may not know where Myrtle Beach is, or that you're in South Carolina. You're a South Carolina native as well. Grew up in, I believe you said Travelers Rest, South Carolina. And you failed to say that you are an author, first-time author.
Yeah, so I am a first-time author, and it was interesting that the book came out a month before I moved. And so that my wife has to remind me, hey, you had a book come out in the middle of all this. So yes, we did have I said we, it was my daughter and I in essence started something together called What I Want My Kids and Me to Know, Being Better Humans One Napkin at a Time. And it was just a fun thing I did with my daughter when she started second grade. And it's just one of those things. You talk about joy and fun and just finding meaning in life. It just started as that. And as things do sometimes when you just start from a very pure way, it just took a life of its own. So yeah, I had a book out in May and it's out now. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah, of course, we're going to talk about that book. We are recording this in the summer of 2024. As you've mentioned, you have just made a move. And for me in the summer, I guess it's the longer days here in the US. I'm on the East Coast. Our daylight goes to, almost 9 o'clock before the sun starts setting. And I feel like I have more time outside. I have more free time. And I got thinking about what that might look like, spiritually. Like, what does that look like for opportunities to play? And as an adult, I'm not sure we use the word play a lot with our activities. And I'm really not sure we use the word play a lot when we talk about our faith.
Right.
In fact, playing in our faith might even be frowned upon, because it tends to be, something that we want to be very reverent about, and it's a sacred space. But as I was reading your book, there were lots of things. Well, there's 45 napkins that you have like kind of little essays about, and they were all so impactful. And I shared with you earlier from the very first one, it was, as a mom, it was really emotional for me. It's like things to learn in second grade. No one sits alone in the lunchroom,
Right.
I was like, oh my goodness, such wisdom. And that just continued on. But a couple of things you said in the book really kind of caught my attention as we're talking about this topic. one was when you live from the inside out,
Mhm.
you become much more invested in the things you can control and the value this brings to your soul. And when you have good soul care, you will
Mhm.
always be surprised by how this naturally radiates out. And I love that thought about soul care. And I want us, I'm going to go to the second thing, but I want us to kind of hold that there because we're going to talk about soul care. And then the second thing, which is directly related to our conversation today, was something you wrote on one of the napkins: never miss a chance to play in a rain puddle. And then you added, I think this is advice from mommy, because this was a napkin for your daughter when she was in, going through school.
Right,
So, never, if we take a piece of that, never miss a chance to play, period.
right.
Yeah, what does that look like for us? Kids are so good at this. One of my favorite memories, I have two granddaughters, and the younger one said to her older sister one night after dinner, "Let's go outside and run around like kids do." And
Mm.
she was exactly right. Kids do that. But we become adults and we don't get up from the dinner table and go outside and run around and chase lightning bugs like kids
Right.
do in the summer. How do we re-enter that space?
Yeah, I think about the idea of playing in the rain, and for me growing up, rain was an opportunity to go out in our backyard with my brother who's 3 years younger than me. I'll name him Trev. Trev, you're in a podcast. Congratulations. If it rained, it was not, "Oh, man, it's rained." It was, "It's raining. Let's go put on old sweatpants and go in the backyard," and whatever sport was in season, whatever ball was in season, we did that. And so the rain was an opportunity to go in the backyard, get as muddy as possible, doing what we played called great catches. And then somewhere along the way, moving into adulthood, we just get too cool for it. I don't know. And we just gravitate away from fun. And we are a delight deficient culture. Just that's it. We're delight deficient. And I'm curious. I think sociologically, I would love to find some research on this because I got to think somebody's done it. But it's like we think we have to grind so hard in life that if we're awake, we have to be productive. And I'm an Enneagram 3, and I suffer from that in a really hard way. I took renewal leave last year for 5 weeks, and 3 weeks in, I drove my wife crazy. She was right. I was trying to journal during renewal leave, and I was journaling so that when I got done renewal leave, I could talk about renewal leave. And it was driving me crazy and her crazy because she was seeing that, "No, no, no, you're not being healthy right now. Even when you're supposed to be on renewal, you're trying to prepare to produce something for somebody else." And so as a Enneagram 3, I have to learn at my healthiest, like, I'm at my best when I'm living, you mentioned earlier, from the inside out. And when I learned to find joy, to schedule joy, like we schedule everything else on our iCalendars, why don't we schedule moments for play and joy? Like, if I don't do that, and then I am rotting. And I think, for me as an adult, there are things that as an adult become harder. One is cultivating friendships. I think doing this, especially, not that we are any more righteous or worthy more than anybody else, but United Methodist clergy, when you move, it's hard to make for you were people's pastor, and you're like, "I just want to be Tyler. I just want to be when I am being Tyler, I can still be pastoral." And so learning how to be uniquely me, and how to play within that, is when learning to live from the inside out. Like, that's what that is. Like, for me to go out and play, like, "Hey, it's okay. Let the dishes sit in the sink an hour after dinner. Go outside and play." Yeah, it's hot. Trees are melting down here in Myrtle Beach right now. It's so hot. But go outside, sweat, go play, go run around. Find those songs with your kids that just make them pop and light up, and go and dance with them. And a couple years ago, at my last appointment in Aiken, South Carolina, I encouraged our congregation to have like a summer of joy. And it was from John chapter 15, verse 11, where Jesus reminds you that, "I have said these things to you so that my joy will be in you and your joy will be complete. And one of the most simple things I tell people is, if you want to know if you're following Christ, can you find any of the 9 fruit of the Spirit present around you? If you're not sure what to do, look for those and follow that. Well, joy is one of those. And joy and peace are significant to that. And Jesus had a lot to say connected to that, because so often what he would do is he would meet human needs, physical needs, that would then, when those are met, it allowed the spirit to be free. And we get so bound up in almost getting just gridlocked in things that really don't meet our soul where they are, that we kind of box out joy. We box out opportunities to play. And like being a parent, the secret to being a parent is that there is no secret. Nobody ever really tell people who write books on parenting. It's really good advice, but until you do it with your kids, you really have no idea what you're doing. I still don't know what we're doing with a 9 and an almost 4-year-old. And so it's the same thing with being an adult. Like, we think, "Oh, I'm an adult, I have to act like this." No, go have fun. Go do that thing that your soul longs to do. Go do that thing that you mentioned your grandkids said, "Hey, that's what kids do." Go do that. Just because you did it as a kid doesn't mean you have to just forget it as an adult. And it's almost like we need permission to be human again. And that's where, for me, theologically, the fruit of the spirit lives when we play. Like, when you're now, again, there are things you need to go and do play wise that don't harm you, don't harm your body, don't harm others, and also don't do things to other people that are not helpful. But we need to play. I think discipleship includes play, and churches should be a part of that in our community. We get so worried about looking right, being right, that we just forget to be. And so I think that for me is where all this is rooted in. Just, it's very much who God's made us to be, is to be people who seek joy through play. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I think Jesus would have a little bit to say about that today.
I think that we have this image of Jesus and the disciples as just very, very serious, always studying, always, Jesus always teaching and preaching and doing really, serious work, which had happened. But I like to imagine, I mean, they were living together all the time. I like to imagine there were lighthearted moments, they were laughing together, they were living life together, which I hope included these joyful times that were about just being. And but do we have evidence of that? Are there some places in the Bible where we see Jesus playing or being more lighthearted?
I mean, I think with Jesus, yeah, I think it's sprinkled all throughout, just in his character and his nature. I think the way that, I was telling my daughter this today. We were talking before they went to camp, something about, as a preacher, do you, or as a pastor, do you ever get bored because you know all the stories? And I'm like, no, absolutely not, because you're always answering, what am I missing? What am I seeing differently here? Especially maybe as an adult or as a parent of, that my season of life brings me to read to a text that I didn't previously read. And so many of Jesus' parables are contextual. And I mean, half the parables he does, if I told you first time I read those, I knew what they meant, I'm lying. Be and if somebody tells you that, they're lying. And he was so, I think, to be able to speak with people in a way that he he was a little bit sarcastic. He he calls people out. Sometimes he calls them out in very, clear ways, other times very subtle ways. In his character and his nature, he's empathetic. And, I think about, like, his looking for fun. He looks up in a tree, right, and sees Zacchaeus. And if I'm walking by today and I see somebody up in a tree, I'm probably gonna pretend like I didn't see him. There's some whimsy there to stop and go, "Huh, there's a guy in a tree up there. I think I'm gonna go have dinner at his house." I mean, there's a certain whimsy that he has to stop with a tax collector, Matthew, to tax collectors, people, they were scum of the earth to people. To stop and talk to a tax collector, to be whimsy, to live his life in such a way that all the things we look to at Jesus were interruptions. Play can feel like an interruption to us. I struggle with that because heaven forbid you take me off a task I have in my mind that I have to get done. And I think with Jesus, we see that just in his character and in his nature. He's never running places. I tell people sometimes, a lot of times we have to move at the pace of love, and sometimes love moves at a pace that we don't want it to because we want to go fast and we want to do it instantly. And he's never in a hurry. I think about, of course, there's the story, it's the one about the wedding in Cana turning water into wine. Like that's being at a party and turning it out with some wine. That's not the point of the story. It was a miracle, but I think Jesus also knew what he was doing. I just think there was a whimsy about Jesus that when and I try to tell people, like, we want to look at a collection of stories. We don't want to just pull one story and say, well, that's him. We want to look at the full mosaic of who he was. And he was whimsy. He's whimsy because he wasn't in a hurry. And when you're not in a hurry, you're able to be empathetic, and you're able to be empathetic with people. You're able to sit at a table longer with people when you're sharing play together, because when you're playing with people, like when you're enjoying something, you get to know each other like fairly quickly. And so I just think moving at a pace that is not hurried, moving at the pace of love and being whimsy, those are things about Jesus I look at and go, God, I want that so bad. But I think that's the totality of who he is, that we want to use him as evidence to make a point instead of looking at him and going, no, no, that's the mirror I want to hold my life up against. That's what I want to become, that character, that nature. Um, I wish we did more of that, more of becoming the character and trying to become the character and nature of Jesus, rather than turning Jesus into 3 bullet points that support some evidence for an argument that's going to make no difference tomorrow.
I've never considered the adjective whimsical when I've thought about Jesus,
Mhm.
but when I do, it does add another layer to his character, and we know that we have imagination, and I believe that imagination and creativity is something that's innate in us, that, is
Mhm.
part of the being that God created. How can we become that childlike person and kind of reach back inside of us and discover that play that that's going to be joyful and have us being rather than doing.
Right. I think a thing for me that I think about in my life, it happened last year when I was on renewal leave. My brother and I, and two of his best friends from college, we started a guys golf trip 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember getting to a point where I was where my feet were with these guys. We were on Lake Russell in Georgia, in Elberton, Georgia. And I remember looking up at the trees, taking a deep breath, and just staring at the breeze, just kind of wisping through the tops of the trees, and just kind of getting lost in that for 30 seconds and going, I wonder how that happens like that. That's interesting to me. And realizing I've spent a lot of time on golf courses, and that was the first time I had thought that. And I think that dialing into that imagination is, again, it goes back to the whimsy, the unhurried pace of life, is looking around with wonder. Like, I'm sitting here talking to you, looking out in our new backyard and looking at trees that we didn't have in our yard at our previous house we were living in a week and a half ago, and just thinking, that's interesting while that's here. Uh, but moving at a pace that invites curiosity and imagination. I think when we live with that perspective, it invites a whole new discovery of life. And I think something, and this connects to life in the church, is we've lost prophetic imagination. We have an access today. We have access to The church has never had access to as many resources and mediums ever as it does today, which also means we have some of the greatest opportunities to cultivate discipleship pathways than we ever have had before. But it takes imagination. We don't swing open the doors anymore on Sunday morning and people just come. That's not it anymore. But it's that thing about that prophetic imagination, the fact that if we have the DNA of the creator, well, what is the creator? What is the verb of a creator? To create. If we're missing out the invitations that are unique to us to create, whether it's, go create a drawing, go create a walking path in your community, go create a neighborhood happy hour where you drink sweet tea in your driveway with your neighbors from 5 to 6 p.m. once a week. Go we limit create, right, to being something that we can go and display in a gallery, or we limit the idea of creating to thinking something somebody can buy. No, that's if that's solely what we're thinking about making something somebody can consume. I'm talking about creating, and that's bringing something out of us that I think inspires what is good and holy in other people around us, whether it's to come together in community, whether it's to come together and inspire the imagination of other people. Like, curiosity and imagination are contagious, so is wonder. And when we lean into that, I think we kind of set this spark that just is a chain reaction. And I just think today we've lost. We have to reclaim that thing inside of us that creates, and to realize we all have this thumbprint of God, this eternity on our heart, this thing. What Proverbs 4 tells us: guard your heart. That's the wellspring of life. Like, what do you think that wellspring does? It's a fountain. It's not a drain. And so we are creating things, but the creative process, you can't just sit there and go, all right, it's time to create something. You have to, it's a life, it's a rhythm. And you can't schedule when inspiration hits. Uh, but you live a life that cultivates creativity, that when it's time, you're ready. But I think it's going again. I'm realizing this in our conversation goes back to that whimsy nature of Jesus, and the DNA of the creator, of God, who puts all this in order. Like, creators create, and we need to understand who we are. And I think that's part of discipleship, is to understand who we are. I'm entering my 40. I'm 40 now. Like, I am coming into about a 4 or 5 year process of learning who I am, being in this crucible, which I write about that a little bit in the book. But I was in this crucible that was brought upon our family with our daughter's birth and a pandemic and all that. And in those things, you can either be formed or you can let them just burn you up. And what came out of that was seeing, like, we don't have to live this way. And we want to invite others to spaces to be curious, to create, and to do so in a way that is unique to them. And to do that, we have to know who we are. We have to understand the way God's made us, and that's a maturity thing as well. And to me, that's an important discipleship thing, is understanding, how do you play? Some people, we love coloring, others don't want to color at all. I mean, again, it's understanding who you are, so you can better understand, sort of like, what kind of fuel your engine takes, which is, again, that's a creative process.
Let's take a minute out of our conversation with the Reverend Tyler Strange to ask, what do Wesleyan theology and the Methodist way of life have to do with Benedictine ideas and practices? In the new book, The Fullest Possible Love, renowned teacher and United Methodist scholar Paul W. Chilcote, and a former Get Your Spirit in Shape guest, explores these surprising and profound connections. Chilcote, who is also a Benedictine oblate, writes from deep personal experience, offering a remarkable approach to spiritual practice that is both new and age old. This book isn't just a read, it's an invitation. With every purchase, you get access to a free study and implementation guide by Michael Adam Beck. This guide provides step-by-step help for church leaders looking to bring this innovative approach to their communities. Imagine a path where Methodism meets mysticism, creating a harmonious way of living your faith. Visit cokesbury.com/fullest possible love to learn more and start your journey to a new way of practicing your faith. As you were talking, I was thinking about when kids go out to play,
Mhm.
there's no goal. There's no we're not out there for a specific result. We're just out there to be, which you had said that earlier too. There's no really doing, there's just being. And I think I mean, we're all children, and I hope that we, had the kinds of lives where we could go out and have that freedom and that whimsy and that space. So it's inside of us, but I think it gets blocked as we age because of responsibilities and I mean, things that are valid. And we certainly can't play every day because, there's things that as adults that have to be, taken care of. But, when you think about a spiritual discipline, my thinking of it anyway is that it's something I'm going to do that's going to draw me closer to God, that's going to impact my faith journey. So, for yourself, Tyler, how have you seen that happen? How have this changing? I hear you, it sounds almost like a shift you've
Mhm.
had, and it is intentional because as an Enneagram 3, you're naturally drawn to achieving
Right.
and goal setting. So tell me about that shift that's happened and how you feel like that's really impacted your relationship with God and your journey of faith.
Right. So part of my learning is over the course of the last year, I was so fortunate to be a part of the Reynolds program for church leadership, which is launched out of Western North Carolina, but it serves 5 or 6 states in the southeast of the United States. And one of the things that we did there was we learned. It was the first time where I got to take all these different assessments. I mean, we've all been assessed, right? But nobody ever takes your assessments, and you never get to sit down on the table with somebody who is trained and can take the assessments and put them together. Like it's like pouring all these. Basically, the best way I can say this is it's like pouring all these ingredients into a crock pot and then seeing what comes out of it. And so learning about that, learning all these different assessments, Myers Briggs, DISC profile, all those things. Like how do they work together? Like, that helps me understand that because when I understand that, I understand what I value, and when I understand what I value, then I can understand how to make these decisions and how to discipline myself. So for me, my I've learned, like so the way I'm wired is I need values to guide me. If I know values and I know a direction, I'm set. You don't have to. I'm good. And so for me, like my values that I've learned were my top five were health, higher purpose, lifelong learning, creativity, and generosity. And discipline for me means those things are they're not so much my guardrails, they're my GPS. And when I'm rooted in those five things, I am going to be my healthiest. And the discipline for me that comes out of that is that like I understand where I need to lean into and where I need to kind of not. I'm creating this I'm basically creating my own culture for what I need to be. So the way that my sort of shift with play and with my relationship with God is that um God has called me to be human. And it's the bumper sticker thing, right? You're a human being, not a human doing. It's so cliche, but it's true. And when I am human being, it's because I am first taking care of those things inside of me. Those those things that I have determined that I value. When I am building my life around those five things, then I am being who God is calling me to be. And I am in a rhythm where I am seeing the presence of God more around me. I am more open to the invitations of God, and I am more curious about going deeper in the way of Christ. But I can't do that if sort of my value system is being discombobulated. because I start as an Enneagram 3, I start drifting towards trying to please people. One of the worst things for me is unclarified expectations. If I don't have unclarified expectations, I'm going to be an anxious ball of just mess. So for me, discipline comes in my value system. And so the way that I play in that is like it's being whimsy. Uh I've done this before. At my first appointment, I remember cutting somersaults in our conference room. Just need to get up and move around. Hey, y'all wanna go cut somersaults? No way, I'm too old. Well, fine, go do a barrel roll. Playing. I have been known in my last. I had a Bluetooth speaker. One of the best things I discovered was I found a Bluetooth speaker at my last appointment, put it in my office, and I have a very wide ranging music taste. And it was nothing for me to just randomly cut on something that you got to move to. And so for me, just cutting like music, I have a soundtrack for everything. It's a running joke that I have a song for everything in life, and I have a GIF for every text in life. But it's that fun thing that reminds us, hey, we don't have to be so buttoned up. And so when I am enjoying people, and when I am enjoying them in a way that we're just sharing in the experience together, right? I'm not enjoying it because I'm trying to create something or produce something, or it's something I need to do for my job. I'm just enjoying people. That that is me delighting in God because I am delighting in somebody else who is made in the image of God. And as a result, I'm probably learning something I didn't know. And so being with people in an unencumbered way. If that I know that sounds unencumbered could be like snooty or whatever, but it doesn't mean that at all. It means I have my agenda is being present. That's my agenda. Doing that, playing something like our church, my new church, we have a softball game tonight. I'm so excited to get out there and do that. But playing with people, playing sports with I enjoy playing golf. I enjoy playing softball. I enjoy moving around with people, but that for me is when I'm delighting with people in such a way that I'm just delighting in sharing this experience with you. Full stop. That's the agenda. I feel deeply connected to God. And again, that's because I'm staying on my GPS.
I love that, and I like what you said about, I mean, understanding what really makes you tick or what
Mhm.
these core values are, that's going to be unique to each of us. So it really is. I mean, we could probably sit here and come up with 5 to 10 ways that you can play, and that could build your spiritual discipline.
Mhm.
But it really is what is it for me? And what is it? These are going to be, God created us all as individuals. And so those places where we find value or those places where we find connection are going to be unique to each of us.
Well, and I want to one more thing. As you're talking about this, I'm reminded there are things that we do as a family that my wife is fantastic at celebrating people. I'm not, because that means I gotta change my schedule and what I was set out to do that day, but I wanna be so good at celebrating, and so that's the other thing about not just the that I forgot to add was not it's not only just being with people, it's celebrating people, it's seeing people, it's acknowledging people, and she is fantastic about that, and so, like, I've learned, how to have kinda we kinda budget in a way that our budget has room to celebrate people. If that means you gotta go buy balloons and show up at their house, or we've been known to fill up an church office with balloons on birthdays, like, celebrating people, seeing people is another way that I find myself, which sounds weird, but it's coming from a healthy place, not a "let me please you" place. So but I wanted to acknowledge that too, because that also for me, having people around me who contribute that's a blind spot for me. Uh, but when I trust them to see that, oh my gosh, it just makes things so much more fun.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. Well, as we finished up today, is there anything else that you wanted to add? And before you answer that, I will note that we'll include a link to your book on the
mm,
episode page. It's just so rich with wisdom and play and
mm.
fun. And so I just think it would be it's just, well, it was really special for me. So we'll definitely include that. But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't yet discussed?
I would love I just wish there was a way. Matter of fact, maybe I'll do this later on social media. I wanna hear what brings people joy, and how do we all like, what does play look like for each of us? Like, when we hear from other people and we go, "Oh, I'm not the only one." I think that is so encouraging, and there's such momentum in that. Like, I think that would be the thing. The one more thing I would say is, I go back like grief, right? Nobody talks about grief yet. It's something we all have in common. Well, we all desire, whether we admit it or not, to be a part of play and of joy creating, and we don't talk about it enough. And so I would just be to encourage anybody that hears this to go and talk about joy. Like, what's the one thing you want to go do that you want to go do that you just haven't done? Go do it. Who's the one person you need to go and invite who say, "Hey, I got this really just whimsical idea. Can I tell you?" Tell them. And then, like, who can you talk to about creating a list of things to go and do to enjoy that are playful? Do that, bring people in on the play process, on the play pro we need a better word than play process, but that's what I would say. Share that with people and invite people into your life to help you do that.
Oh yeah, that's great suggestion and a really great way to open yourself up to what play looks like in your own life as you're asking other people what it looks like for them.
Right.
And now, Tyler, I'm going to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests on Get Your Spirit in Shape. And how do you keep your own spirit in shape?
Right, so I heard this years ago. It was called, RPMs, and it's the acronym RPMS, and it stands for me, it's health metrics: relational, physical, mental, spiritual. And I have sort of this way that I gauge it. Do I feel like my tank in each 4 areas it's growing? Do I have to pour from, or is it feeling almost parched in each one? And so I gauge that. So for me, relationally, if I feel isolated, or if I don't feel as creative, I usually just got to pick up the phone and call one of my best friends, or one of my really deep friends who I know will speak life into me or will bring it out of me. That's one of the things I do. The other one is the physical one. I got to go exercise. If I go, I've tried to take up running more because running allows me to see things I don't otherwise see because I'm in a car. Uh, when you see things, you tend to see things differently and process them differently, and so that's a good one for me. And then mental, having a therapist and a counselor, I got to stay on top of that, and take care of that, especially with anxiety and that sort of thing. And then of course the spiritual one, play for me is so important for the spiritual component of my life to be outside, because I'm not going to have a problem reading scripture and studying script. Like, I have to do that. It's a part of my calling, and it's just that's a part of who I but it's that part about love the Lord your God with everything you have, not just your mind. That's your body, it's your schedule, it's your budget, and that includes play. And so if I'm feeling spiritually parched, it really is usually because I'm not doing enough playing. And so those for the RPMs, that's such a wonderful filter for me to gauge that. And usually I know, like I said, with each act with each letter, I kind of know what that correlates to for me. And so we try to keep those front and center for me, as I move through life.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a great way to kind of keep check on it for sure.
Mhm.
Well, Tyler, thank you for being a guest on Get Your Spirit in Shape. I just appreciate you and your ministry and all that you do for the United Methodist Church.
Well, thanks for having me, Crystal. And I look forward to hearing this when it comes out, and just continuing to see our connection thrive through platforms like this. This is such a wonderful avenue that you've provided. So thank you for doing this as well.
Thank you. That was the Reverend Tyler Strange discussing how to find joy in a delight deficient world. To learn more, go to umc.org/podcast and look for this episode, where you will find helpful links and a transcript of our conversation. If you have questions or comments, feel free to email me at a special email address just for Get Your Spirit in Shape listeners, GYSIS@umcom.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, we invite you to leave a review on the platform where you get your podcast. Thank you for being a Get Your Spirit in Shape listener. I'm Crystal Cavanis, and I look forward to the next time that we're together. Did you know that the United Methodist Insurance Program is deeply rooted in the Book of Discipline? That means we're committed to serving our churches with the utmost integrity and care. Whether you're a large congregation or a small community chapel, we understand your unique needs and are here to help you safeguard your ministry. Visit uminsure.org to request a quote and see how we can partner with you in ensuring your ministry's safety and peace of mind. Again, that's uminsure.org, protecting what matters most.